Hello. This video will be a tier list for white openings for beginner level. To quickly go over how I'm grading these openings, I can go over the criteria that I used. I'm assuming the beginner level means under roughly 1,000 rating on chess.com. I'm also picking these criteria to grade these openings. Ease of learning, meaning how easy is it to learn and play the opening at a beginner level. Practicality, meaning how likely is it that you're actually going to end up in the starting position of the opening. And then 3, meaning what are the chances that you're actually going to get a favorable position out of the opening due to your opponent making a mistake. For all of these, I'm assuming that this is picking an opening to main with over a long period of climbing. I'm not assuming that this is something these openings are something that you're picking for one-off games or to trick one opponent on blitz or something. This is assuming you want to play it for hundreds of games for long-term growth and improvement. So starting off, we have the center game. The center game for white follows after e4, e5, and then white playing the move d4, which is the starting position of the center game. The center game is practical. You will get the position. I don't think it's a good choice in terms of ease of learning and for chances of favorable position. I think it's just kind of a cheesy trick, to be honest. There's not really any value in learning it. Center game on its own, I have to just put it squarely in the bad tier. It's just not a good choice for beginners at all. Next up, we have the bishop's opening. The bishop's opening for white follows after e4, e5, and then I believe bishop c4. Yeah, bishop c4 on move 2. I put it very, very similarly to the center game. It just doesn't really push for any sort of advantage. There's not really any value in learning it. It's a little bit better than the center game. And there are ways, for example, that it could transpose into a normal Italian. But at that point, you should just be learning the Italian. So, yeah, the bishop's opening is bad. It's a little better than center game, but it's just bad. I would never recommend it. And next up is the Vienna game. The Vienna game follows after e4, e5, and then white playing the move knight to c3. The Vienna game is actually an opening I've done a video on. It's, I think, a very, very good choice for beginners. It is quite easy to learn. Not the easiest. I would give it a 9 out of 10 in terms of ease of learning. For practicality, it's 10 out of 10 for sure. You're going to get e4, e5 70% of the time, if not more. And then in terms of chances for favorable position, it's got to be a 10 out of 10 as well. It is very likely that your opponent will make a mistake and you can just crush them out of the opening. So the Vienna game, it's got to be the first S tier opening already. It's one of the openings I definitely recommend, especially for players that like to attack and win by checkmate. It's one of the best opening choices you can play as a beginner. So next up is the Ponziani Opening. The Ponziani Opening goes after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then white playing the move c3 here in order to set up d4. The Ponziani is... this is a tough one. It's not as good as the Vienna. It's got to be at least a tier lower. It's also definitely not bad. I would say it's a little harder to learn than the Vienna and not as likely to get a favorable position. So really, it's kind of just a worse choice than the Vienna game all around in every way. But the way I'm kind of thinking of this is the S tier openings are the ones that if a student came up to me and asked, I need an opening, what should I play? The S tiers are the ones that I would first suggest. The good tier is if a student came up to me and said, I want to play this opening, I wouldn't say no. And then the bad tiers are the openings where I would try to actively dissuade a student from playing those openings. So the Ponziani, I think it wouldn't be a first choice that I recommend. But if it's something you're willing to learn and put time into, it's also a decent choice. So I think it fits right in the good category. Next up is the Four Knights game. The Four Knights game follows after e4, e5, and then there's a few move orders that can follow, but the Four Knights game is just characterized by all four knights being developed after e4 and e5. So this is the starting position of the Four Knights game. I think it's very similar, in my opinion, to the Ponziani opening. It's easier to learn than a Ponziani, but it's just very drawish and even. It's not super easy to play for an advantage. It's also very, very common at the beginner level. A lot of beginners will end up in this position, whether they know it or not. I think it's very, very close. I don't know if I put it above or below the Ponziani. I think a little below. Because personally, I prefer trying to play ambitiously, especially at the beginner level. We shouldn't be playing for draws when we're below 1,000. We should be trying to learn how to play for a win. So therefore, I think the Ponziani is just a slightly better choice than the Four Knights game. That's not to say the Four Knights game can't be played for a win. I think it's just not as straightforward to play for a win in that as it is in openings such as the Vienna. So I think it's a good opening, just not as good as some of the other S tier openings we're going to get into. Next up is the Scotch game. So the Scotch game follows after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then white playing the move d4 on move 3. The Scotch game is a very, very good choice. It's got to be S tier for sure. It's very close to the Vienna. I think the Vienna is a little bit more of an attacking opening, and the Scotch is a bit more of a trappy, tricky opening, in my opinion. They're both excellent, excellent choices. It really just comes down to preference between the two. Personally, I like the Vienna slightly more than the Scotch, but it has absolutely nothing to do with objectivity or how good the opening is. It's just the Vienna is more my personal style. But the Scotch game it's very, very easy to learn. It's very practical. If you play e4, you're going to get e5 like 80% of the time. If you play knight f3, you're going to get knight c6 like 60% of the time, and then d4 is the starting position. So extremely practical, extremely common, very easy to learn. If you learn it well, there's a lot of good traps and ways to get winning positions. So it's an easy S tier. The challenge is just where is it between... But grading them between the S tiers is hard. I think anything that's in the S tier is a fantastic choice, and it really just depends on your playstyle. Which, if you don't know what your playstyle is early on, that's fine. You can just pick any of them and see what you like. But yeah, I think I'm overthinking it. I think it's just a solid S tier. And next up is the Italian game. The Italian game starts after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then white playing the move bishop to c4. I have a video on the Italian game, and I think I titled it something like The First Opening You Should Learn. And I heavily stand by that. I think it's the best beginner opening by far. If I pull up the grading criteria, I think it's a 10 out of 10 for ease of learning. It's one of the easiest openings you can learn as a beginner. It's very fundamental. I think it's a 10 out of 10 in practicality. That starting position is one of the most likely you'll ever get. And for chances of favorable position, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. It's not as tricky and trappy as maybe the Vienna and the Scotch, but you're very likely to get a slightly better position. It's very safe and solid. Not a lot of ways you can go horribly wrong. So I think for the average player below 1,000, if they wanted a first opening to learn, I think the Italian is the best choice. And I think, as I said before, it's the perfect beginner opening. And next up is the Ruy Lopez, or the Ruy Lopez, also known as the Spanish Opening. It looks very similar to the Italian, starts after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then instead of bishop c4 for the Italian, we play bishop to b5 instead. The Ruy Lopez is at least a tier below the Italian, solely because of the fact that it just requires a lot more theory and memorization. It's just harder to learn than the Italian, and it doesn't present much more ambition than the Italian at this level. As you get into higher and higher levels, you can transition from playing the Italian to the Ruy Lopez not without much difficulty. But for beginners, I think the Ruy Lopez is just a little bit too difficult to learn. When options like all three that are in the S tier exist, I think the Ruy Lopez is just too difficult to learn and not as... It's too difficult to learn without much payout. So I think it's in the good category. And then I think it's even maybe a little bit worse than the Ponziani. And a little better than the Four Knights game, but I would place it right there in the middle of the good category. So next up is the Scandinavian main line. The Scandinavian main line goes after e4, black playing the Scandinavian, which is d5, and then the main line will be after pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, and then knight to c3, attacking the queen immediately. This one's tough to rate. If black is playing the Scandinavian against you, you don't really have a choice to avoid it. I think the main line is just the best choice against the Scandinavian. This is a weird one to rate. Okay, see, if the question was rating this in terms of openings against the Scandinavian, this is absolutely an S tier. Like, this is the best choice against the Scandinavian for beginners. But if you're asking me what's the first opening I should learn, then I have to go down a tier because you're not getting the Scandinavian as often as you're getting e5. So just because of that, I'm going to put the Scandinavian main line in the top of good. It is the best choice if you're seeing the Scandinavian and you have no way of avoiding the Scandinavian. But at the same time, you're only probably going to see the Scandinavian like 10 to 20% of the time. So it's not worth your time to putting into it immediately. It's better worth putting your time into all these S tier openings, which are all e4, e5, and much more common. But again, it's the best choice against the Scandinavian. So you can think of it in that way. Okay, for this next one, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit confused. I tried to look up what Scandinavian triangle was, and I couldn't find anything. And I'd never heard of this before in my life. So I really have no idea what Scandinavian triangle is referring to at all, to be honest. Okay, my guess is instead they're looking at if after the Scandinavian, instead of knight c3, we play knight f3 to try to play c4. I have no idea. Just because I've never heard of it before, I'm putting it in bad. Like, I have no idea what this is, and I don't know why you would ever learn it, to be honest with you. This is just bad. Okay, next up is the Colle Sicilian. The Colle Sicilian is after e4, black playing the Sicilian, which is c5, and then white plays knight to c3, eventually trying to play g3, bishop g2, and playing very positionally. Okay, this is the first time I think I'm gonna have to use this category. I think the Colle Sicilian is just too much theory. I think it's not a bad opening by any means, but it's just so much theory, and I don't know anyone rated below 1,000 who's willing to memorize that much theory. So I think it's pretty simple. It's not bad at all. It's not a realistic amount of theory for a beginner to memorize. So for that reason alone, I would discount it for that reason alone. The Grand Prix Attack. The Grand Prix Attack is in the Sicilian after e4, c5, knight c3, which is the Colle Sicilian, but rather than playing for g3 and bishop g2, there's a few moves that black can play, but the Grand Prix Attack is noted by playing the move f4, which is the starting position for the Grand Prix Attack. The Grand Prix Attack, it's one of my personal favorite openings, just outright. It's not the best choice for beginners because it's a little bit too much theory. It's not as bad as the Colle Sicilian. It's very, very aggressive and attacking. And for that, I think if it fits your playstyle, it's a great choice. However, I think there's just slightly better choices against the Sicilian for beginners. I'll put it near the top of the good category. I put it right there. It's a good choice, but I think there's at least one opening which is just much, much better against the Sicilian for white, for beginners particularly. Next up is the Alapin Sicilian. The Alapin Sicilian is after e4, black playing the Sicilian with c5, and then white plays the move c3. I have a video on the Alapin Sicilian opening. I think it is by far and away the absolute best choice for beginners against the Sicilian. It heavily cuts down the amount of theory you have to learn, so it's probably the easiest opening to learn against the Sicilian. Practically, if you're playing against the Sicilian, you're going to get this 100% of the time, so 10 out of 10 there. For chances of favorable position, it's also a 10 out of 10 at the beginner level. A majority of the time, people are not playing the main theory. So I got to put the Alapin in S tier. The only reason it's not higher is that for beginners, you're going to see e4, e5 more than you're going to see e4, c5. However, against e4, c5, I think the Alapin is the best choice, and I don't think there's a second. I don't think second place is even close. I think the Alapin is absolutely the best against the Sicilian. But if you came up to me and said you only had time to learn one, I would say you should spend your time first into learning one of the e4, e5s. And then after you've learned one of the e4, e5s, then you should go and spend time learning the Alapin. That's how I would recommend it. Next up, we have the Rossolimo Attack. The Rossolimo Attack is in the Sicilian after e4, c5, knight f3. In this position, black has to play knight c6 for this opening. And then white plays the move bishop to b5. This is the starting position for the Rossolimo Attack. Quickly pulling up the criteria. Ease of learning, it's good. I would give it like an 8 for ease of learning. And chances of favorable position, it's also probably like an 8. I think practicality is the big issue with this one. if black doesn't play knight c6, even if they play like d6, or if they play e6, or if they play g6, for any of those moves, you can no longer play the Rossolimo. So literally for that reason alone, I think the Rossolimo is already bad, if not like bottom of good. I honestly think it's just bad. Like it's just not. If you're picking a main opening to play, like you should not be picking the Rossolimo. You're not going to get it enough for it to be worth it. Yeah, it's just bad. Not because the opening itself is bad, but just because you're not going to get it enough for it to be worth learning as an early beginner. And now we have the open Sicilian, which is the main line against the Sicilian. It follows after e4, c5, knight f3. There's a few different moves that black can play, but regardless basically of what they play, we're going to play d4 after pawn takes, knight takes. This is the starting position of the open Sicilian. This one is hard to rate because it does stick to all of the fundamentals of chess and of the opening. It's also very practical. You're going to get it like 100% of the time. I think the main issue with the open Sicilian is in terms of its practicality. If we pretend that we're playing as the black pieces and we play the Sicilian, the very first thing we're preparing against is what we're doing against the open Sicilian. And because of that, you're probably going to play into your opponent's preparation with the open Sicilian. The other issue with the open Sicilian is just how many different moves there are for black to play here. In this position, g6 is a move, e6 is a move, a6 is a move, knight c6 is a move, knight f6 is a move. And there's even more moves there that are more obscure, but those are all like genuinely viable mainline variations that can be played against you as white. For all of those reasons, I gotta put open Sicilian and not practical. There's just too many there's too many variations you have to remember. This is weird because like it's a lot of theory, but it's not the theory memorization that's the issue. It's how many practical lines we have to memorize. It's not that each of those like variations requires a ton of theory and memorization. It's that there's just so many different things that practically speaking, we're just not going to be setting ourselves up well. So for myself personally, I got to put the open Sicilian in just the not practical category where you're going to get the position, but again, practically speaking, your opponent is just going to be better prepared than you are if you're playing this. Like, it's just too difficult to make the open Sicilian work for a beginner. And now we have the category of the French opening. So all the opening options we have against the French defense. So the French defense is after we play e4, black plays e6, with the idea of playing d5. Usually white plays d4 and then d5. And the first variation we're looking at is the exchange variation, where we exchange pawns with e takes d5, e takes d5. So this is the starting position of the exchange variation. I gotta say it outright. This is just bad. It's just very drawish. Like if you're willing to learn something against the French, I think all of the other options will just lead to more ambitious positions. And once again, like I said before, at a under 1,000 level, I'm never happy just playing for a draw. We should always be looking for wins. And because of that, I gotta put the exchange French in the bad category. It's definitely better than the bishops opening, the center game, and all that. It's definitely a valid opening. It's just that it's primarily playing for a draw. It's not really playing for a win. And that's the reason I don't like it as much. Okay, and now we have the advanced variation against the French. So rather than exchanging pawns, the advanced variation is noted by white playing the move e5 and advancing the pawn. I think this is the best choice against the French for beginners. I'm going to put it pretty much in the same category as the Scandinavian main line, where it is the best choice, in my opinion, against the French. It's just the issue being that you're not encountering the French defense enough to where it's worth memorizing as your first opening. However, if you already have an opening against e5 and you already have an opening against the Sicilian, or you're preparing for a tournament against a player that always plays the French, then in that case, I would say the advanced French would become an S tier. But I'm going to put it in the top of good, pretty much just because it's not super common that you're seeing the French. But if you ask me, the advanced French is the easiest to play, it's the most straightforward, and it leads to good winning opportunities. Okay, now we have the mainline French. The mainline French follows after e4, e6, d4, d5, and then the move knight to c3. This is the mainline French. This one's pretty easy for me to rate. I'm just putting it right in too much theory. I don't want to dive too much into it, but there's a ridiculous amount of theory that you have to memorize to make this work. And considering that we're only seeing the French like 15% of the time, why would we devote hundreds of hours of memorization and prep into memorizing something we're only going to see 10 to 15 times? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Even at my level, or like even 2000 plus, I wouldn't be playing the mainline French. I would be playing the advanced or the Tarrasch. Because even for me, like even at my level, I think the mainline French is ridiculous for how much theory it would require. And I think that alone should say why I would not recommend it for beginners. Okay, next up is the Tarrasch French. The Tarrasch French is very close to the mainline French, but instead of knight to c3, we play knight to d2 instead. And if you've never seen this before, you might think to yourself, what's the big difference? It doesn't look like much. Surprisingly, it's actually a huge deal. Playing knight d2 cuts out a huge amount of theory because of the move bishop b4 is no longer really viable. The Tarrasch is actually what I play personally. For beginners, I don't think it's as good as the advanced French. So I think I would just put it at the bottom of good. It does take quite a bit of theory to learn. Actually, quite a bit more theory than the advanced French, if I'm being honest. But it also is a lot better than yeah, I think this is a good rating for it. I'll put it at the bottom of good. It does play for an advantage, unlike the exchange French, but for a lot of people, it takes a lot of theory. It fits certain play styles if you're aggressive and attacking, but for a lot of the players I've worked with under 1,000, they don't show me enough willingness to learn theory to make the Tarrasch work. I think the advanced would just be a better option. And next up, we're getting into the segment of Caro Kann openings. The Caro Kann follows after e4, c6, d4, d5, similar to the French. And the first variation we're going to look at is the exchange, where we play e takes d5 and they play c takes d5. The exchange Caro is, in my opinion, very similar to the exchange French, which is just why would you play this willingly if you're below 1,000? Play more ambitious stuff, like The exchange Caro, if you're playing this, you're saying to me, I want to play for a draw and I'm happy with a draw. And if you're a student of mine below 1,000 rated, I would never be happy with that thinking. You should always be playing for a win. So therefore, I think the exchange Caro is a bad choice. Okay, now we have the Panov attack in the Caro Kann, which, after the position of the Caro Kann, e4, c6, d4, d5, we go into the exchange line, and then we play the move c4. C4 denoting the starting position of the Panov attack. I think the Panov attack is a lot better than the normal exchange variation. I still think it's bad though, because it just takes a lot of theory. And I think other lines in the Caro are easier to learn and are better and give better chances of a winning position. So I would say the Panov attack is just a slightly better exchange variation, but it's still bad in my opinion. The advanced Caro Kann. The advanced Caro Kann follows after the move d5 is played. We advance the pawn and play the move e5. I think the advanced variation, similar to the advanced French, I think it's the best choice against the Caro Kann. Basically, all the reasons I gave for the advanced French are exactly the same for the advanced Caro. It's the best option against the Caro, but it's not super likely that you see the Caro Kann. So I'm going to put it at the top of the good category. Okay, the mainline Caro Kann. The mainline Caro Kann follows after the Caro Kann starting position. We play the move knight to c3. This one is... It's way worse than the advanced Caro Kann. I think it's a little bit better than the Panov attack. For me, I think this is kind of similar to the Tarrasch French, where it takes a bit of theory. I don't think it's as good as the Tarrasch French. I think bottom of the good tier makes a lot of sense. It's harder to learn than the advanced. So like, why would you learn the main line if you can just learn the advanced, in my opinion? But it's still good nonetheless. So I think it's okay. It's an okay opening, but not my favorite. Next up is the F3 variation of the Caro Kann, which is also known as the Fantasy, where on move 3, white plays a move F3. I think the Fantasy variation is very, 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 very good. It's pretty close with the advanced Caro Kann. It's maybe a little bit harder to learn, but is much trickier and gives you better chances of a winning position early. It's also more aggressive, so if that fits your play style, it could also make contention for being better than the advance. I think between the Fantasy and the advanced Caro Kann, I think those are the two that are really fighting for first place, and they're pretty close. And it really depends on the player which one's better. So I think the Fantasy is a fantastic choice to learn against the Caro Kann, especially if you're a player that loves to attack and get aggressive positions. And now we have the category of openings against the Pirc Defense. There's a few different move orders that this can arise out of, but the way it's really categorized is the Pirc Defense is noted by black playing the moves g6, bishop g7, and like knight f6 castling. This is kind of what the Pirc Defense looks like. They also will like usually play the move d6, something like this. Like this setup is really what the Pirc Defense is, and then these openings talk about different setups for white. So the first setup we're looking at is the knight f3 setup against the Pirc, which, as you can guess, is noted by playing the move knight to f3. I think this is an okay choice against the Pirc. I think if you haven't studied against the Pirc, this is probably what you're playing naturally. I would put this at the bottom of good. You're only seeing the Pirc defense like maybe 5-10% of the time. So given that, if we don't have much time to study, knight f3 is a great choice because it takes very, very, very little to study it, and you'll get a playable position. But the other choices will give you a lot more ambition at the cost of having to learn a little bit more theory. But I think the knight f3 setup is the perfect, like, solid middle of the road choice that doesn't require much memorization. The next setup we're looking at is the f4 setup versus the Pirc, which is noted by white playing the move f4 very aggressively before playing the move knight to f3. I think the f4 setup, it's very aggressive. I think it's better than the knight f3 setup as well. In terms of where I actually put it, that's tough. I would say it's like somewhere here-ish, like middle of good. It's a good choice. I think, not to spoil it, I think the other choice is a little bit better and easier. But it's a very good option nonetheless. And if you're someone that likes playing for big space in the center, then this is probably the opening you would like and prefer. So I think once you're willing to devote some time into learning something against the Pirc defense, f4 is definitely a worthy contender to learn. Next up, we have the f3 setup versus the Pirc defense. That's denoted by playing the move f3, and then eventually you're going to play the moves bishop e3, pawn storm the g and h pawns, queen d2, trade off the bishop, and just try to checkmate the king on the king side. The f3 setup is very aggressive. It's one of my personal favorite choices, openings in general, really. I have a super high win rate against the Pirc defense given this opening. I think if you're picking something against the Pirc, you're picking between f3 and f4, depending on your playstyle. And really, it's just a matter of preference. My personal favorite is the f3, and for that reason alone, I'm just going to put it one spot higher than f4. But if you're at a point in your development where you're ready to learn something serious against the Pirc defense, think about if you prefer big space advantages in the center, or if you prefer pawn storming and attacking the king. And that's really how you're going to pick between f3 and f4. But I think these are both your best choices against the Pirc defense. The Queen's Gambit opening. The Queen's Gambit opening starts after d4, d5, and then white playing the move c4. In order to try to gambit off the flank pawn for the center pawn. This one's tough to rate. I think it's way worse than e4 for beginners. I think it just takes a lot more theory than e4 for not much advantage. It's also not bad. I'm considering just throwing it in the too much theory category, if I'm being honest. Like it's an amazing opening, and if a student came up to me and said, like, I have this book on the Queen's Gambit, and I have it all memorized, and I'm willing to learn all of it, then the Queen's Gambit is S tier. But like, that's not most people. Most people are like, I have 5 to 10 minutes I'm willing to learn an opening, and that's it. And if that's you, there's no shame in that. Just don't play the Queen's Gambit, because it's not a good choice. If that more sounds like you, then play the Italian or the Vienna and watch my 10-minute guides and start playing games and winning. But If you want to play the Queen's Gambit, you got to put some serious hours and time into learning it. And that's just not something most beginners are willing to do. So I think too much theory is a good choice, is a good category for it. Okay, the London system. This one I have a pretty contentious take on, but before I get into that, the London system follows, well, it's a system-based opening, so it's not really a specific move order. So the moves from black aren't too important, but the London system is just kind of denoted by this setup for the white pieces, where they play this like triangle setup, and like it kind of looks like this for the most part. No, don't worry too much about the specific moves, but it's a system-based opening, following d4 and like bishop to f4. But anyways, like I said, I have a pretty spicy take on this. Many people have the opinion that the London system belongs at the absolute top of S tier and that it's the best beginner opening. I do not agree with that take whatsoever. And I'll get into why. If we're talking ease of learning, it's an easy 10 out of 10. It's probably the easiest opening to learn outright by far. And also for practicality, it's also 10 out of 10. Like there's nothing that black can do to stop you from getting your setup. However, it's really these 2 points where I think the London system fails. In terms of chances for favorable position, like the London is a very passive, not passive, but it's just not, it's not trying to ambitiously win. You're just trying to chill for the most part. Like you just want to get out of the opening solid and safe and chill. But you're not like pressing your opponent or putting any pressure on them. So for this one, in terms of chances for a favorable position, I gotta go like 2 out of 10 or 1 out of 10. Like it's one of the worst in terms of trying to get a win. Like there's not a lot of winning chances in the London if you're playing the London system. And then really this is the point where I have a lot of issues with the London. The London teaches you that you can ignore what your opponent is doing for the first 6 moves. It teaches you I can close my eyes and play the first 6 moves and I can get away with it. And that's just not how chess works. Like you're gonna build a lot of bad habits if you play the London system. It's going to stunt your growth long term. You're gonna put a ceiling on how good you can get at chess by playing the London system. There's so many reasons to not play the London long term. The only reason I would suggest the London is if a student came up to me and said, I have a tournament tomorrow and I just need an opening where I won't get killed in the first 10 moves and I don't have time to memorize something, then the London's okay for that. It's a good choice short term. But for long-term growth, it's not good. I'm going to put the London at the bottom of good. But I have a lot of problems with it. And if a student came up to me and said they wanted to play the London system, I would make very clear all of the points I just made now. Because it's one of those things where you're going to get away with it now. You're going to get away with it for a long time. But it will come back and bite you. And it'll bite back hard. And you're just better off, if you're early and a beginner, you're better off just spending your time learning something like e4, where you're going to get better winning positions and you're going to become a better chess player. The Colle system. The Colle system is close to the London. The main difference between the Colle and the London is that you don't move the bishop to f4 before playing a move like e3. For the most part. The Colle is literally just a worse version of the London, in my opinion. So just because of that, it's going in bad. It's just a bad London. And for all the reasons I don't like the London, I don't like the Colle, plus other reasons worse. So the Colle system is just not good. Next is the Trompowsky Attack. The Trompowsky attack follows after d4. Black plays the move knight f6, and then we play bishop to g5. Trompowsky attack is a good choice. It's not the most practical, because I think more people are going to play d5 than people that are going to play knight f6. For that reason alone, it's going down a tier for that. I'll put the Trompowsky on the lower end of good. It's a really good choice. And like if you play d4, this could be an excellent choice against knight f6. But if you're looking for a first opening to main, like this isn't going to be something you encounter all the time. I'm going to put it at the lower end of good. I'm going to put it below the London, just on the lower end of good. The Torre attack, it's very, very, very similar to the Trompowsky. After d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, we then play the move, bishop to g5. I mean, I just got to put it as a worse version of the Trompowsky. It's playing the Trompowsky, but you're even less likely to encounter it because even less people know the theory. So it's just a worse version of the Trompowsky, and you're even less likely to get this opening than you are the Trompowsky. Next up is the Catalan Opening, which follows after d4, d5, c4, e6, and then the move g3 in order to put the bishop on g2. The Catalan it's a tough one. You are pretty likely to get it a lot, but it's also kind of complicated to learn and play. I'm going to put it... I'll put it on the upper end of good. It's definitely a viable choice for like a main first opening to learn, but it's not as good as like the Italian, Vienna, and Scotch. I'll put it near the top of good. The English Opening. The English Opening is pretty straightforward. It's just on turn 1 playing the move c4. The English it's actually better than people give it credit for. I don't think it's as good as e4 on paper, but in terms of practically speaking, like people don't prepare against the English the same way they prepare against e4. I'll put the English pretty high up. I'll actually put it near the top of good. It's not as easy to learn as an e4 opening, but if you are willing to learn it, you will catch a lot of people off guard. Like a lot of people will not prepare as well against the English. And if you're very well prepared in the English, like you will get a lot of winning positions. I think it's underrated as heck, for beginners especially. Okay, the Reti Opening. The Reti Opening, pretty simply, on turn 1, white plays a move knight to f3. I think at the beginner level, the Reti is just bad. It's not that it's actually a bad opening, but beginners should really be playing openings that stick to the fundamentals. Playing in the center, developing your pieces, castling, like sticking to the fundamentals. The Reti Opening, it breaks a lot of those fundamentals. And at a beginner level, I just don't think they're ready to be playing, no pun intended, they're not ready to be playing openings that require them to memorize theory and memorize the reasons why we're breaking the rules. Don't learn the Reti Opening, learn something easier, and you'll get more winning positions than you would playing the Reti. There's just no upside to it. Next up is the 1g3 opening. Close to the Reti, instead of playing knight f3, we played g3 immediately. I rate it pretty similarly to the Reti Opening. As white, there's no reason we should be giving up the center as a beginner. So I think it's just not a good choice. We should just be playing stuff that really fights for the center right away. King's Indian Attack. There's a few ways that this opening can arise. I think the most typical is after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and then a move like g3 in order to fianchetto, play d3, castle, and then eventually try to play d4. The King's Indian Attack, for intermediate and higher rated players, this would be higher than I'm going to rate it now. But for beginners, kind of similar to the Reti and G3 opening, I think we should just be playing more ambitiously in the center. So because of that, it's not a bad opening though. I think I might actually just put it in too much theory. Like the ideas of it are just too strange and non-standard for a beginner to know without having it memorized. I think too much theory is a good category. Like it's for that reason alone, I wouldn't recommend it. But if a student already memorized it or was willing to, then it's a good choice. Next, we have the Larsen Opening, which is denoted by playing 1 b3 on turn 1 in order to play bishop to b2 and fianchettoing. Again, very similar to Reti and 1 g3. I think we just shouldn't be playing this way as white and breaking the fundamental rules. It's just a little too difficult to learn for beginners. Just not something I would recommend until maybe like a 1500 level where you've gotten a lot of games with the fundamentals and you're ready to start experimenting. But early on, this is not something you should really spend time learning. Next up is the Bird Opening, which is denoted by white playing 1 f4. This is a silly one. I'm just gonna straight up put it in bad. It's just kind of silly. Like it takes a lot of theory to learn, and it doesn't really present a lot of upside. So there's not a lot of reason to learn it. The only reason you'd kind of really learn it is if you want to troll people, or if you're like super, super high elo, and you're super, super memorized, and you're playing it for practical reasons. But for anyone below 1,000, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Next is the Orangutan Opening, which I actually had to Google. It's denoted by white playing the move 1 b4. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on this. This is straight up garbage. Bottom of bad tier. Don't touch this. Next is the Grob Opening, which is denoted by playing 1 g4. I'll be quick. Same as the Orangutan. This is just straight up trash. Don't touch this. Bad opening. Next is the Van Geet Opening, which is denoted by playing 1 knight c3. Not as bad as the Grob and Orangutan, but it's similar to like the Reti, Larsen, and G3 openings. I'm going to put it towards the top of bad. But there's not really any reason to be playing these hyper-modern openings, especially as white, as a beginner. I would just recommend learning openings that really teach the fundamentals. And that's my tier list. Let me know if you disagree with any of my opinions. I'd love to know in the comments. Again, this tier list is very opinion-based, and I'm sure many people will have slightly different opinions than I do. For many of these openings, I have video guides on my channel if you would like to check those out. If this video helped you out, please comment, like, and subscribe. It helps out a small channel like mine greatly. Other than that, good luck in your future chess games. Have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.